Hello everyone, I won 7th place at CoreTCG's Remote Regional this past weekend, and I kind of want to explore it and kind of dive into some like the 3 reasons that I felt this build really excelled at and helped contribute towards the win. So, to discuss the Yummy deck, it's a Yummy pile deck, specifically the Yummy Radiant Typhoon with Tri-Brigade cards. To look at the 3 main reasons why I think this deck was the best version of the pile I could have brought was number 1, I made the main deck more consistent. I adjust some of the ratios and expanded upon the Tri-Brigade main deck cards to add an extra push, and you'll see that in the deck profile. And then number 2, I added engine cards for being the chummies in the side deck. The Fua and Purulia are kind of like the main problem that the deck faces, and because you're summoning so many times from the hand and from the deck to make your massive board with all your combos, right? That's kind of like the only thing that the deck struggles with. Like, it just kind of eats those 1-for-1 hand traps. So in order to beat those cards, because you're only really dealing with the Purulia specifically, which is the main problem for the deck when you're going first. So I realized that and decided, oh, I'm going to add some in-engine going first cards that I'm always going to have once the deck gets going to beat those Purulia and the Fulos. And then last but not least, I dealt with the biggest problem, which was Nibiru. Nibiru for this deck is a menace. Right? The problem that I actually kind of like dropped it for a while was that, like, no matter what you would do, you were just kind of like rolling, if not the opponent would have the Nibiru, and like you couldn't create anything to be able to deal with it. And so what I figured out that there was actually a card in the extra deck that I could leverage, and through some efficient use of my materials, I created lines in which you could use this extra deck card to always beat Nibiru. In the regional, I was able to beat the Nibiru 5 times. I got nibbed 5 times, and 4 of them I didn't even matter, didn't do anything. The one game that I lost that tournament, the match, was because the opponent had Fua, Purulia, Shifter, and Nibiru. So in that case, was it really the Nibiru that was the problem? Or was it the Shifter was the bigger problem? So in that case, all 5 times the Nibiru came down, it was not actually the problem, and I was able to beat it. Alright, now let's look at the cards. For the main deck, we have obviously the Yummy package is super standard. We don't really need to spend time on this, right? For these types of variants, you're typically only going to run Cookie and Lollipop at 1, and that was good for that. Now, onto the part of the deck that actually mattered. The Tri-Brigade allowed me to make the deck more consistent. By upping Fractal to 3, I now had extra pushes and a more consistent way to make my end board. 1 Fractal was amazing. 1 Fractal in your hand is amazing. It can do the whole combo on its own, right? Plus, when you're going second, you now have 5 different possible pushes with the addition of Fractal at 3 that you consistently see to allow you to break through anything. Now, this guy was crazy. There are a lot of lines where you're going to need to use a Nerval or a Kit to banish one of your Yummy cards, and because of how Fractal works, you can actually use him to dump the Yummy that you banished earlier on in the combo. Next is the Radiant Typhoon cards. These are super standard. And the only thing to really discuss is how they worked in this deck. They specifically are more extra additional pushes, extra bodies. So you're not running the bricks and the things that lock you because there was no real reason to, right? You're using your bodies to get into extra end board and interruptions, and that's kind of what you're doing. You're using the Yummy cards to get into everything else, and even the Radiant cards to get into everything else, and that you just have so many pushes that you're able to maneuver your opponent. The Ascendance gets sided out every time going second, but is an excellent card going first, and I also frequently sided out these cards going second against most matchups because you don't really need more than 1 if you're not going first. Now for the non-engine, we have 11 cards here. We have the 3 Droplet, 2 Droll, 3 Ash, 3 Fulos, and honestly, these were amazing. Initially, I realized that Droll was excellent because, like, honestly, a lot of times you could even draw yourself when you got Fu and Prulian, right? So that you could go through your whole end board, use the Droll to harm your opponent, use the Droll to beat the things that end up costing you the game. And that's how I didn't lose to really much of anything other than Shifter, Nib, Fua plus Prulian. And then the Ash Blossoms were really good. I don't think I sided it out, which was something that I was previously doing in other parts of the build. Now, the cards for beating Prulia specifically and Fulos when you go first. So the in-engine cards that beat those are these 3. So the Mandate was relegated to the side deck because it's actually a pretty solid answer to those cards. The Assist Yummy was crazy and the Kroku was crazy. So, like, for example, when I got Fua plus someone Fua and Prulia's me and I'm forced to just end on like Snatchy plus level 1, I was able to leverage these guys in that situation to put up enough interruptions that I don't die and therefore get to my turn, the crackback, and then win that game. That's exactly what happened. If you're able to do it a little bit slightly different, like when I got Fulos, I was able to use the Radiant cards to get to Mandate. 3 more going first cards I would put in is a Designator with the Prulia to beat that and the Crossout, right? So this just need like the 6 going first cards that you put in to beat the things that beat. And because those 3 cards are in engine, it means you're always getting them. Now, the going second cards, we got triple Nibiru, Duster, 2 Lightning Storm, and triple Ghost Ball. These were all really amazing throughout the day. When you're dealing with the Habikiri and the Mitsu deck, the Ghost Spells were really, really strong there. And just in such a format that's super wide, having these board breaker like cards, right? Being able to use Bell as a board breaker, being able to side in the Duster and the Lightning Storms to beat the Draco Tail and other stuff like that. So the Nibiru didn't really come in that much because it isn't really good against the Mitsurugi cards because it distributes them against their effects. But when it did come in, it was very good in those matchups. Now, on to how I was able to beat Nibiru using the extra deck. So the main thing was to prioritize making SP Little Knight in the center zone, right? So the whole idea is that once you get to SP Little Knight, you're able to, when they Nibiru you, go SP Little Knight plus one of your other interruptions, allow your Yummy guy to die, and then you're able to bring it back on their turn with the surprise. And I got Nibiru'd 5 times, and 4 of them, they didn't even matter at all. And even the 5th time, it was not the Nibiru that lost me the game, right? So the lines that like this allows you to insulate you, because you don't have access to any sort of negation, you're just able to prioritize making SP Little Knight while holding another push in hand, because you're going to have the Tri-Brigade cards, you're going to have the Radiant Typhoon cards, and you need to hold them in your hand until the SP Little Knight is established. Or if it's going the other way around and you start off with Radiant Typhoon cards, you need to hold your second push in your hand until you finally make the SP Little Knight on the field. So in terms of what the extra deck is, we got SP Little Knight, and then we have the Yummy package, Linkuriboh, Snatchy, Lollipo, Cupsy, and Cookie. And then we also have an Almirage, which helps to make the Tri-Brigade stuff more effective, right? If you need to normal summon Kit, this gets combo for that. And then we have the Tri-Brigade stuff, right? All of these were like absolutely necessary. You learning to leverage Lightheart, not just as a bridge, but like every single time. The first Tri-Brigade summon that you're going to do is like banish 1, make Lightheart, right? So that when you're trying to bridge into the Radiant Typhoon stuff, you can then, on the second one, banish 2 for this guy. Now that you have 3 banished, and then when you dump the Shurag, you can now add a level 3. Then the last 2 cards are these. Honestly, this guy only comes in like when you're going first, you side in the Mandate, which honestly only happened like twice. But the Totem Bird, learning those lines where you can summon the Totem Bird at the end of your combo is insane, right? Because of the way this deck works with the SP Little Knight blocking the Nibiru, then the Totem Bird comes down at the very end of your combo. It's just crazy. So let's go through an example. So let's just say that for our example here, right, the whole idea is you want to start with your Yummy names, because with this deck, right, you're going to want to keep your second push in your hand. So if I were to have a Eldum for example, or like a Swin, I'm going to keep that. I typically before was using these to bait up the interruptions, but realized that's not how you beat Nibiru. So we go from here into Snatchy. Snatchy gets the Mignon. This is just very standard. We go Cupsy. And honestly, it doesn't even matter. There were many times where I would lead with maybe like a Cupsy, and then it would get impermed, and then even if we're not leading with Cupsy in this situation, this guy would get ashed, right? And that doesn't even matter if this guy gets ashed at all. But for this example, we're going to not get ashed, but even if you did get ashed, you tag out, you get these two, and then you go into the Lollipo, and then the Lollipo brings them back in that situation if you get ashed, and then you can still just do your combo, right? But in this situation, we're just going to show you one basic example of like how you're able to get to the SP Little Knight in the center zone, right? We're gonna use SP Little Knight here, make this guy, and then go into our, get our 4 bodies on the field. And then from here, we can't yet get the SP, so we go Friend into Kit, sends the new Kit, which revives the old one, and then here, they're forced to Nibiru. Okay, if they don't Nibiru here, you banish 1, okay, you go into the Lightheart, and then you use the Lightheart to get into the SP Little Knight, and then the SP Little Knight banishes your Friend, and then you're good to go. They can't really do anything here, and then you now can use your second push to make the rest of the board, right? So like you were just summoned here and started popping off. It doesn't exactly matter what we would do now, but regardless, like the end board, we're gonna be able to get there because they can't really Nibiru us anymore. If they do, you just banish 2 of your main guys, probably the Ancient Warrior dude, along with SP Little Knight, and then they're still dealing with like 12 interruptions on their turn. So thank you for checking into my deck profile and this kind of like exploratory video on why I was able to win the 7th place at the Remote Regional. If you haven't already, please check out my other video where I discuss how I made this balance and actually do a scientific analysis where I roll it 1,800 times and then come to the conclusion as to whether or not these dice that I make are balanced. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you guys next time.